This is a story about an uninvited guest. Sarah, who lives with her husband, has something that's been bothering her lately. It's that the electric bill has been rising. She first thought that there is nothing she can do about it. Then she notices something was different with her thermostat and the contents of her fridge. She brings it to her husband Eric's attention, but he brushes her off, saying that she's just thinking too much. It is when the couple found out that a wine that her husband had hidden disappeared. They began to suspect a possible intruder. In the beginning, both Sarah and Eric thought that their son Jason, who had been away for college, was suspicious. However, the real intruder was someone completely unexpected. I've been suspecting that there may be someone sneaking into our house. Why? Because the electric bills have been surprisingly high lately. My husband Eric thinks it's just my imagination. Again this month, I noticed the increase in the electric bill compared to the gas and water. Seeing my puzzled expression checking on the expenses, Eric teasingly asked me, "What is it? Are we in the red this month?" Don't be silly. Ever since I'm in charge of our domestic finances, I've been pretty good with our deficit. But it's just that the electric bills are absurdly expensive compared to last year. I just don't get it. Eric takes a look at the list of expenses and agrees with me. With Jason leaving the house for college, I would assume we can expect the bills to be much lower, I tell my husband. You're right about that. He was always complaining how he was freezing at home and cranked up the heat. Thank God those days are gone. He looked bewildered at the numbers on the bill. I can't think of any reason, can you? It's not like we've got a new electric appliance that I've been operating 24/7. Eric shows a contemplated look on his face, but shakes his head. No one's home during the day since we both work in the office. We make sure that all the lights, AC, and thermostat are turned off. We've been quite conscious about it. Maybe we should check to see if there are any electric failures. I know they provide a free service to check for leakage. I told Eric that was a good idea. However, a few days later, perhaps to my oversensitivity to the bills, I noticed something bizarre. Why does the room feel warm? Eric was coming home late that night, and I usually stop by to get some groceries on the way home. Normally, the house, which has been kept empty for hours during the day, feels extremely chilled when I get home. But it was different that particular day. The air in the room is slightly warm, though the curtains were completely shut, just as when I left the house in the morning. The thermostat was turned off, and other portable heaters were all off too. But I did feel something was not right. I missed the timing to tell Eric about what had happened, as I wasn't sure how to best explain the situation to him. But the situation continued. One day, after I got home, I went straight to my room to change. When I opened the door, there it goes again. The air in the room felt warm. The other day was down in the living room, but today I felt the warm air in my bedroom upstairs. Then, all of a sudden, I knew why. The last time when I noticed a slight difference in the air, I had stopped by the kitchen to put the groceries in the refrigerator before I went to the bedroom to change. This time, I came straight up to my bedroom, only to find my room had been warmed up. Our house is fairly old that it's not equipped with the best insulation system. Of course, the house is strong enough to protect us from strong winds and storms, but the temperature in the house drops pretty quick once we turn off the thermostat, which means it's palpable that someone has been in my room. I felt the sudden chill and looked around the room with fear. Could there be a possible robber in the house? I frantically opened the closets and doors to the other rooms, but no one was found. Still feeling unsure, I turned on every light I could think of in the house and roamed around the house with my son's tennis racket in hand and my back timidly bent down low. "What's going on?" Eric said absurdly, looking at me clutching the tennis racket. I stuttered and tried my best to explain the situation, but he didn't seem to quite get it. Instead, he said that the temperature in the room doesn't feel any different and that I am once again overthinking, especially if the doors were locked during the day. Yet, I insisted on my weird feeling, but Eric didn't seem to care at all. Can you please make some dinner for me? I am starving. I had a lunch meeting with my boss today and I wasn't able to eat much since we got into a heated discussion. I wasn't happy with my husband's reaction, but went into the kitchen and opened the fridge to start preparing dinner. That is when I noticed that the pesto jar that I had purchased yesterday was gone, and things in the fridge seemed to have shifted around its placement. We both loved pesto from this particular brand, which has been our staple, and I always buy a new jar before we run out. I exactly remember getting another one yesterday, and there was only a spoonful left in the jar. Finding a jar that's almost finished still left in the fridge, I instantly knew it was Eric because it's his bad habit that he always opens a new jar before even checking to see if there's some left. Hun, I always ask you to check before opening a new jar. I know you must have taken it since it was right in your sight, but you opened the new jar and left the old one again. I complained to Eric during the dinner, but he seemed clueless. I explained again about the pesto jar that he must have opened. I also told him how he shouldn't have finished a whole jar in one serving since it's too high in sodium. I know that you love that pesto. You crave for it, especially when you're tired, but you really should watch the amount of sodium intake. That jar easily has 4 servings, and you finished it all on your own. You really should watch out for hypertension. What are you talking about? Eric responded bluntly. I looked up at him, surprised to see his reaction. Then he said, You prepared me fried rice for a late night snack last night. Do you think I would eat a whole jar of pesto with fried rice? Sure, I love that pesto, but never with fried rice. I replied to him by saying, But I can't find the new jar that I bought yesterday. I couldn't help notice that it's not only room temperature, but the contents in my fridge were different than I last checked. I once again told Eric that something is definitely wrong, but he still showed no signs of interest. Honey, it's your imagination again. Maybe you forgot to put it in your shopping bag. I know you can be clumsy and forgetful at times. Eric laughed, but I didn't find it to be funny. From there on, every time I come home, I would frantically check the rooms in the fridge to see if anything was different than how it used to be before I left the house. I know it sounds crazy. Your home is a place where you should feel the most safe, but I just could not get over the idea that something was wrong. I came to find something bizarre every other day. For instance, the room temperature, or the channels on my TV was set to a channel that we normally didn't watch. One day, the volume of the contents in my freezer was so much less than I remembered. I would normally chop the vegetables and some meat and freeze them in separate freezer packs so it takes me less time to prepare dinner after work. That day, I couldn't help but notice that some of those pre-packed freezer bags were gone. Yeah, it's small things that could have been passed as unrecognizable, but the more similar incidents happened, I was becoming confident that we had uninvited visitors while we were gone. Yet, Eric only saw me as overly sensitive and reacting to the situation until one of his things went missing one day. Hey, honey, did you happen to drink that wine? He asked. What do you mean? I responded, not having a clue what he was saying. Then he put this expression on when he gets busted and sad. Don't worry, just disregard what I said. I didn't expect Jason would take it with him. I got annoyed seeing him mumbling to himself, and so I questioned Eric quite harshly. Hey, do you want to tell me what's going on? What did Jason take? Surprised to see me upset a little, he answered, I purchased a bottle of wine from the year we got married since it's our 20th anniversary next month. I wanted to surprise you. I had never seen such a romantic side of Eric. He continued, I had it hid in my wardrobe, but I heard that wine shouldn't be kept under steady temperature, so I was going to hide it in the storage instead. I just went to get the wine from my wardrobe, but it was gone. So I assumed you must have found it and drank it already. It bothered me that Eric actually thinks that I'm so greedy to sneak into his wine that he had been hiding. I wish I hadn't heard what he had said, but I pretended to ignore it and responded to him. Of course it's not me. And for sure it's not Jason. Don't you remember that boy can't drink at all? You're right, of course. I knew that. Then why? Eric looked puzzled. Then I told him what I have been noticing in the house. I didn't know how to bring this up to you because I thought I was overthinking, but it's obvious that something weird is going on around here. Then I started to list the incidents I've encountered one by one. They may seem unnoticeable, but I am certain that we have been having unwanted visitors during the day. But who could it be? Eric asked. The fact that the only other person who has keys to our house is Jason, which would make him a potential intruder. Then I said, you're right about the keys, but why would Jason sneak into our house? He knows that the door's always open for him, plus he's too busy to come back to visit, remember? He was back for just a couple days ago for the summer because he was busy with his work and tennis. Eric had to agree what I said, but he didn't seem convinced since he was eager to find out who had stolen his expensive bottle of wine. He then insisted that we should call and ask Jason. I thought it was silly, but agreed to call my son just to make my husband feel better. What is it, Mom? I'm leaving for work soon, Jason responded, flatly through the speakerphone. Honey, I know you're busy and sorry to catch you at bad timing, but there's something we want to ask you. Then my husband interrupted and roughly asked Jason, You didn't take the bottle of wine from our place, did you? Jason sounded perplexed, so I had to explain to him what Eric had meant. I also shared about the incidences I had been noticing at home lately. And you guys thought that I stole it despite the fact that I can't drink at all? I apologized to Jason and told him I didn't think it was him. Jason then showed his concern by saying, I'm worried though. You can't blame Dad for not noticing. He doesn't even know if he's drinking a glass of rotten milk. He's the kind of person who doesn't doubt but thinks it's a liquefied yogurt. But I believe you, Mom. If you think it's suspicious, then there must be something going on. Jason and I share a similar sensibility. He seemed to have gotten my gut feelings more than my husband. Jason continued, You really should set up a security system. Locking the door is not enough nowadays. I highly recommend you find a security company and get a contractor as soon as possible. We hung up the phone. Eric seemed to be pondering what he rarely does. I guess if it's not Jason, then we're left with mine and your parents who have keys to our house, I responded sharply. You know that's not possible. My parents live in the city where it's hours of flights away. Eric's parents live fairly close to ours, but they had a legitimate reason that prevented them from going out. Eric's father was taking care of his own father, who had diabetes and was in a wheelchair. My in-laws were the kind of people who impose strict rules and morals to themselves and to others. There's no way that they would leave elderly Grandpa home alone to sneak into his son's house. Not knowing what we should do, I told my husband, What should we do? Report it to the police? Honestly, I didn't think that the police would make any action considering the severity of the situation, but I also couldn't stand to live in a house where I felt the constant presence of a stranger. Eric took in what I said for a while. Then he opened his mouth. Honey, do you know exactly when these weird incidents happened? I didn't know what his intentions were, but I told him that I had taken notes in my diary. I thought the notes may help to investigate when such a situation would arise. Do you recognize a certain pattern or something? He asked. For instance, like days of the week or certain kind of weather and such. Aha, I replied, flipping through the pages of my diary. Then I came to notice a certain pattern. It was on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays that it had happened mostly. Just once on Tuesday and Thursday, and never on the weekend. What the hell? Sounds like our trash day, Eric annoyingly scratched his head and said. Then we realized that it was Wednesday today. Eric then asked me if I would be able to take the day off this Friday. I was surprised to hear him say that he would also request for a day off on Friday, because he would never request a day off unless he had a very high fever. I asked my husband, Are you suggesting that we should be on a stakeout? Then he laughed it off by saying, Are you kidding me? It's freezing out there. I don't want to catch a cold. And suggested with a smirk on his face, The intruder will sneak into the house for sure. so we should just hide ourselves and ambush the unwanted guest. I was skeptical if it would be as easy as he had made it sound, but since I had no better idea to deal with the problem at hand, we decided to take a day off from work and conduct our plan to find out what was going on in our house while we were gone. Sarah and her husband Eric now was going to hide themselves in the house and await the uninvited guest to come. Just when they began to doubt their idea, there was an intruder who unlocked the door and entered the room. It was someone least expected on the scene. Infuriated as they can be, Sarah and Eric began to grill the intruder. "Okay, I'm leaving. Have a great day," Eric shouted in an overly theatrical way. "You too, honey," I responded pretentiously. It's so silly how we put on an act since we had no clue where the intruder could be watching us from. I pretended to see my husband off as he drove away from the driveway. Then I locked the door and left the house as if I was headed to the train station to go to work. Just when I turned the corner a couple of blocks away, I found my husband parked at a nearby parking. I hopped into his car. We were confident that things were going well so far. Then he drove back to our house, parked the car on the back side of our street, and re-entered the house from the back door. Unable to turn the thermostat nor the heaters on, we covered ourselves with heavy blankets and hid behind the sofa. We kept our eyes screwed at the entrance door, waiting for the intruder to come in any minute. "Do you think he's coming?" I asked Eric. "Don't know, but even if he doesn't show up today, we should report it to the police. Let's also set up a security system. Can you help me search for a good security company? I know you're good at things like this," Eric responded. I was surprised that somehow he sounded very different from the time when he casually brushed me off saying it was just my imagination. Today he sounded sincere and caring. "To tell you the truth, it was Jason who told me that I should empathize with you more. He said that you must feel anxious at times now that he doesn't live with us anymore. He said that Mom is a strong woman, but she can still be afraid at times, especially under the recent circumstances. And I think he's right. I often come home late at night due to my work situation, and I realize that you're often home alone. I really should consider what I can do to make you feel safe at home." I was very touched by his response. It's been too long since Eric has given me such endearing words. When I was about to tell him how much I appreciate him, he put his finger on his mouth and gave me a sign. Someone was at the door, about to enter the house. As I made sure that my grip on the racket was strong underneath the blanket, Eric slowly stood up and moved his body towards the wall. Here it comes, the footsteps coming into the room. Then, there we saw. It was Sandra, Eric's sister. Eric turned on the light. "Hey, so bright! What are you doing here, Eric?" Sandra exclaimed, startled. "What do you mean, what am I doing here? What are you doing here?" Eric snapped back at her. "Well," she murmured. "Was that you who stole the jar of pesto from our fridge?" I joined. Then Sandra looked even more astonished. Both Eric and I came hard at her, asking questions after another. Then she finally sat flat on the floor as if to express that she has given up. Yet she tried to continue to make idiotic excuses. She even said that her mom had given her the keys, which made Eric yell vehemently and insisted that he will call to check. That is when Sandra finally gave in. She started, "The truth is, my husband started working remotely from home. He said that I was disturbing him, that he tried to kick me out." It's obvious that she's only going to gain our sympathy, so she started to sniff her nose as she continued. It's so annoying how she can act so immature like a teenager, though she's in her 30s already. "In the beginning, I used to stay at my parents' place, but Mom would get upset with me. She told me not to visit her anymore if I only go there to laze around," she whimpers. Her mom is right. A housewife is all she's been, and she should be a pro at things around the home. But she is such a slacker when she's at her parents' place. Even when we all get together for Christmas and the holidays, she has the nerve to sit in front of the TV and not move a single bit while everyone else is busy setting up the table and putting dishes away. She then said something that left both Eric and I flabbergasted. I remembered that you said Jason had moved out for college and that no one is home during the day. I thought maybe I can come and chill for a bit, and so I took the keys that you gave to Mom. Are you out of your mind? Eric shouted and cut her off. Who the hell would sneak into someone else's house to chill? I know Scott wouldn't just kick you out like that. You must have done something to trigger him. Scott works for an IT company. It's fair to think that his job is now done remotely considering the current circumstances, but I'm sure Scott has no clue that Eric and I had to pay the price for it. Not in a million years. Sandra's claim goes on. Scott is so mean. He tells me to go find a job if I'm home with nothing to do. What do you mean he's mean? I work. Sarah works too. Everybody works. Eric responds looking appalled. But that's not fair. I only accepted his marriage proposal because he said I didn't have to work. Now she started to pout, realizing that no one is on her side. Why do you care? Your house has so many extra rooms that they're unused. Libraries are boring, and killing time at the mall costs so much more. In fact, I've been coming here since the summer, but you guys didn't know, right? You've got to be kidding me! Since the summer? I couldn't help scream. Sandra, now looking somehow proud of herself, responds, Scott complains that our electric bills go up if I stay home. I thought this was the best idea. I bluntly told her that now I know the reason why our electric bill is doubled. Sandra finally seemed to understand that we were not joking, but infuriated. She then puts a scared look on her face. Eric then told her, well, tell Scott to bring himself here, now. But he's working today, as Sandra tried to mumble. Eric cut in. We took the day off to sort out the most stupid thing you've done. Call your husband and tell him to come over right now, or else. I will go and drag him here. I'm sure Sandra had never seen him so enraged. She understood the severity of the situation at last. She then called her husband shakenly. I'm very sorry for what Sandra has done. Scott rushingly arrived in no time, and he was very humble. Why did you tell Sandra that she was disturbing you? Why did you kick her out while you were working? Scott started to explain. Since last winter, Scott's office implemented a remote work situation. He began to work in his room, but the walls were so thin, he could hear the sound of the TV from the room next door where Sandra had it on all day. It bothered me so much that I had told Sandra to leave the house on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday while I'm working. He looked ashamed and miserable, telling us the story, but there was no sympathy from him. Eric said, You should have known better that someone will be disturbed if you kick her out. She doesn't work, you know. In fact, she bugged my mom and was told not to visit anymore. Don't tell me it's none of your business. Eric kept questioning ceaselessly, but Scott could only mumble. As a matter of fact, he began to say something that left us stupefied. To tell you the truth, I've never seen anyone more lazy than Sandra. She has no kids to take care of, yet she strongly rejects to work, insisting that I'm not keeping my words of the proposal. I really don't know what to do. It'd be great if you can keep her at your place during the day while both of you are gone. I know you've got some extra rooms in the house. What's there to lose, right? I'm sure it won't hurt you a bit. Married couples often grow to have some similarities, but this is not what I have imagined. Eric looked astounded with his face turning red with anger, but I was also furious as he was. I grabbed our checkbook and shoved it in his face and told him, You said it won't hurt us, but it sure does. The electric bill, so high now that it has doubled since last year. That's right, we're losing our money on the absurd expenses that your wife has spent. Sandra, don't tell me you haven't used a thermostat while you were here, have you? Not only that, the bottle of wine she stole and some groceries that she took from our fridge sums up to over $1,000. Hearing me speak, Sandra started to turn pale, and Scott fired up, his face turning red. Do you mean the wine we had last night? Said Scott. Unfortunately, seems like my husband's precious bottle of wine for our anniversary is now gone. My heart sank to see my husband in shock. Then, Sandra and Scott escalated their quarrel into an ugly battle, calling each other names. It seemed to have slipped their minds that they were still at our house. "I can't believe you stole things from your brother," Scott yelled. "Don't tell me you enjoyed that wine," Sandra shouted back. "You're being so pointless," they screamed at each other. Then, Eric snapped at the both of them to shut their mouth. "Get the hell out of here, both of you. Go rail at each other somewhere else. Leave the keys before you go." Sandra reluctantly handed the keys to Eric. Eric grabbed the keys out of her hand and told her that we will be charging her all of the expenses. As we saw them leave, I told my husband that I had no clue that she had been coming since last summer. Eric smiled warily and shook his head in consent. "I guess she was being more careful in the beginning, but I'm sure she got the hang of it and got carried away," we both agreed. I wonder what's going to happen to them both. Not that I care. But one thing is for sure, resentment about food runs deep. I will definitely have her pay me for the pesto. As I was determined to do so, things took an interesting turn. My in-laws, who were extremely apologetic for what their daughter has done, reprimanded Sandra and Scott. Eric sounded amused to tell me the story of how Sandra and Scott were grounded. Eric explained how his parents were outraged. They scolded Sandra and Scott like children. His dad even yelled at her about how pathetic she was for turning into a thief, and demanded for Scott to show some sincerity. I'm sure he was frightened to see my dad so irate. But in the end, Sandra and Scott ended up paying for our new keys and a lock, all the expenses she had spent, and for our new security system that we had implemented. Turned out that Scott's bonus pay was not enough to cover all of the costs. So, Sandra now has to go to work part-time. I'm sure this will be a much-needed lesson for my lazy sister-in-law. My husband is still trying to procure the anniversary wine, but showing no luck so far. I think I'm going to tell him that I'm happy with him, even without a special bottle of wine. We all want to skip the hard part and play it easy. But it certainly is the wrong idea to impose someone else to pay for the price of it. Never forget the courtesy, especially amongst the people closest to you. Without a feeling of thoughtfulness, the relationships can easily be destroyed. How did you like the story? I will be delighted to know what you liked, was surprised about or agreed with, and so forth. Thank you for reading till the end. Your feedback and comments always inspire us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.